Welcome back to Jersey Matters. New Jersey recently passed a law to ban the sale of flavored e-cigarettes and to limit the nicotine in those e-cigarettes. Here to talk about that is Professor Kevin Schroth, Rutgers School of Public Health and the Center for Tobacco Studies. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
This legislation and some of the legislation all across the country is based on children being influenced to smoke cigarettes or to get addicted to nicotine because of the flavored cigarettes.
Flavored e-cigarettes.
Flavored e-cigarettes. Does that happen?
Absolutely. So just over the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen a remarkable surge in e-cigarette use among high school students and middle school students in the US. We've seen the number of high school students using e-cigarettes go from about 11% 2 to 3 years ago up to 27%. So the number has more than doubled in a short period of time.
But they're not banning e-cigarettes. The question is, does the flavored e-cigarettes cause them to want to smoke it?
That's a great question, and it gets to a complicated part of this issue. There's a lot of evidence that shows that kids that use e-cigarettes are using flavors and that the e-cigarettes is part of the attraction, but that's not all there is to it. If you go back a little bit further, the flavors have been on the market for a long time. And when I say a long time in the e-cigarette world, it's not that long, it's about 10 years. But flavors were on the market before this recent surge. The recent surge was really driven in large part by a particular product called Juul, which some people call the iPod of e-cigarettes because it just changed the game a little bit. So Juul used an innovative chemical process to come up with a nicotine salt. And the nicotine salt product enabled them to increase nicotine levels without making the product bitter. So kids are getting a nicotine spike that's comparable to what you get from a cigarette. And that changed the game.
You're getting at all these things that are attractive to teens without ever talking about the flavors. You started with the flavors, but all these things are attractive to teens whether there's flavors or there aren't flavors. And I guess what I'm getting at is there's a lot of these bills out there in state after state, in municipalities. Piscataway stopped the sale of it. There's federal laws. Why don't they just eliminate e-cigarettes? I mean, why are they nibbling around the edges?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, what Piscataway did was they banned the sale of all e-cigarettes, not just flavored e-cigarettes.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a different approach, a more comprehensive approach. But I think one thing that is really important here is that cigarettes and cigars are still on the market. And if you're going to ban e-cigarettes, shouldn't you also look at banning cigarettes and combustible tobacco products? If you look at the spectrum of risk, the most dangerous products on the market, the products that cause almost 500,000 people to die every year in the United States, 500,000 people often lose sight of the magnitude of that because we're just numb to it over time. But 500,000 people die because of cigarette smoking every year.
So why then, if that's true, go after e-cigarettes? And why e-cigarettes? Is it just the issue of the month or the issue of the year? Is it one of those things that legislators say, well, I can do something about this?
Yeah, it's a really complicated issue. If you go back 10, 20 years, youth cigarette smoking was about 17%, and it's come down to about 5%. Just as that progress was being made, e-cigarettes enter the scene. And the trend line goes the exact opposite direction, where this suddenly becomes a really popular product. And you have people who are getting addicted to nicotine. Well, then if you take away the nicotine, you have a new risk, and that's that they might go back to try to get their nicotine from a more dangerous source, cigarettes. So it gets really complicated. On top of that, we still have adult smokers, and we want to try to help them too. So how do you help the adult smokers to quit while trying to prevent the youth from becoming the next generation of nicotine addicts?
Yeah, all of this I've heard complaints from adult smokers, because they said that they're going after the flavored e-cigarettes and they're going after the sale and they're going after the nicotine levels, and all of it is because they want to stop teen smoking, which is a noble cause. They don't want kids to get addicted. And yet they're saying, we like the e-cigarettes, we want flavored cigarettes, that helps us not smoke. What is my alternative? Mm-hmm. There really is there is some unintended consequences to bills like this.
Yeah, there's no way to thread this needle perfectly without some collateral damage. And I think that an important way to think about this is if you look at the number of kids, and you've got 27% of high school students who are using electronic cigarettes, and you compare that to adults who are using electronic cigarettes, and it's about 3%.
Oh, really?
So the magnitude of risk for the youth use of electronic cigarettes seems to outweigh the potential benefit of adults using electronic cigarettes to quit smoking. And I say that with some trepidation, because I think it's really important to try to help adults who are smokers and want to quit. And electronic cigarettes aren't a perfect way for them to quit. There's FDA-approved ways to quit. That's what most doctors would recommend. But for people who have tried them and have been unsuccessful, an electronic cigarette is probably a less harmful way for them to quit, if they quit completely. And that is another complicated part of this story, and that's that a lot of the time that adults try to quit using electronic cigarettes, they don't quit completely. And
but what you've laid out is it absolutely has an effect on teenagers. It absolutely has caused more teenagers to start smoking, and whether it's flavored or not, just the fact that the e-cigarettes do exist. And there already are age limits on buying these things. So if this isn't the answer, if banning flavored cigarettes isn't the answer, what is?
I think that we should be more restrictive in where these products can be sold. Local jurisdictions and states have the authority to issue licenses for the sale of these products and restrict the availability of those licenses in various ways. I think a really effective way to do that would be to only allow them to be sold by specialty stores, like tobacco/e-cigarette only stores, where people under the age of 21 can't even go inside. That would take them out of the convenience stores and the gas stations where people of all ages go inside and not only can make purchases, but are influenced by the visibility of the products and the marketing from a very young age, which helps normalize the product and make them more interesting to people as they're growing up.
That's a great idea. Maybe it'll be the next legislation. Thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Professor Kevin Schroth, Rutgers School of Public Health and the Center for Tobacco Studies.
Thank you. My pleasure.
When we come back on Jersey Matters, an interview with Congressman Jeff Van Drew, who was the center of national attention this week. That's when we come right back.